to be playing in the biggest game of the weekend. I think atop the SEC, I know there's a big one in Indiana and there's some big games scattered across the country, but when you've got SEC first place on the line going into November, one of the last weekends in October, it's a huge game. Helping us break it down is our favorite, Wilson Alexander. Of course, covers LSU football for NOLA.com and The Advocate, an absolute must-follow on social media. If you are a fan or supporter of the Tigers, and obviously will be in Kyle Field on Saturday night. Wilson, good morning. How are you?
Doing well. You're getting me kind of fired up already, talking about how big of a game it is. I can't wait for this one.
Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. There really isn't another game like this weekend with these kinds of stakes. I mean, I don't know. It feels like maybe number 2 is like MLB on Friday night.
Right.
But like Indiana, like you said, like they play, that should be an awesome game watching Ash and Genty and UNLV with their rise this year. But Indiana plays an unranked team in Washington, and Notre Dame plays Navy. So that one should be pretty awesome. Let's see if Navy can maybe keep it rolling. Be pretty fun if it knocked off the Irish, gave them a second and put them out of the playoff. But still with all like you said, for first place in the SEC, I don't think it gets any bigger than that on this weekend.
Wilson, people are starting to recognize what LSU's doing around the country. There's a lot of talk about the Tigers, especially from a national standpoint. And one thing that has been surprising to watch, especially from someone here locally, is the respect that the defense is starting to get when people are breaking down LSU. What's been the change over the last couple of weeks? Why LSU seemingly playing at this level, holding Ole Miss to 26 and really having a dominant performance from Whit Weeks and others last Saturday night?
It seems like everybody's just really settling into their roles, and the coaching is making a difference, like that it needed to. That's why LSU brought in all 5 of these new coaches on the defensive side of Baker over the offseason, was for these kinds of results, to have a turnaround like this, and you're starting to see it happen. It's interesting that, post Harold Perkins' injury, everybody just seems to have kind of settled in and started to click. And, Whit Weeks being on the field playing the way he has is a huge piece of that. But the defensive line is playing really well. The defensive tackles deserve a lot of credit because, we came to the year with that being a huge question mark. And while they don't necessarily have one singular difference maker, somebody's going to take over the game there at defensive tackle, everybody's holding their own. They're stepping up. The run defense was great last weekend against Arkansas, and they're a big piece of that. And everybody seems to continue to get better. And I feel like it's a confidence thing across the board. We talked to Sage Ryan on Tuesday, and he was just saying how much more comfortable everybody seems to feel, how he himself feels playing there in the back end at safety, starting to bring that physicality back, that identity back, those hard hits back. It was funny talking to him about the play that was almost targeting because he said that it was BS. And then that's just kind of what they're getting encouraged to do again. They're hitting hard, they're bringing it, and I feel like that's been the difference. It's just kind of a total mindset shift from top to bottom on defense.
Wilson, another storyline that we were talking about defensively is the amount of freshmen that have played and really made plays. Brian Kelly, I thought earlier this week, had a great soundbite to that saying, look, that could be scary, but when you pull out of an SEC road win and have these guys getting experience, that goes a million miles. What have you made of some of the new faces that we've seen, especially popping up over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, Ahmad Bro, really seems to stand out there as one of those freshmen, especially just because he, added 40 pounds in the offseason eating Whataburger and, was able to slide in there defensive tackle, a really difficult position to play in the SEC as a freshman, and give them meaningful snaps and quality snaps. And then Dominic McKinley's doing the same thing now that he's gotten over his injury, a guy who's playing without gloves, and just getting in there and playing defensive tackle. And even though he's not playing a ton, he's still contributing. And, Deshaun Spears is in the back end, hasn't been SEC play, but he's still, kind of back there. He's starting to get into the mix some. You see PJ Woodland here and there. He had that nice pass breakup against Ole Miss that was pretty critical in the second half. There's and then Devon Keys and Xavier Atkins. They're getting on the field in critical moments and playing well in their time. Greg Payne goes down there and you suddenly worry oh man, they go to Devon Keys for really the first time in any sort of meaningful way this season, and he slides right in there and it was seamless. And so these freshmen aren't playing well. They're stepping up, and that's helped this defense, especially when you have some injuries to key guys, older guys. Those freshmen have made sure there hasn't been a huge drop-off.
I think you pointed it out on your social media, and I thought it was a great point. For LSU to win a game by 24 points where Garrett Nussmeier throws for under 250 and no touchdowns, that is a beautiful sight. I mean, really, for what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a sign of a football team that's actually becoming a complete and total football team. Because the recipe for this team for really the first month of the season was, Garrett Nussmeier needed to throw for over 300 yards downs. And he's clearly capable of those things, but that's not how you can really win football games in the SEC week after week for a 12-game season. Yeah. Like, you need to have different ways to win football games and be able to adjust if a team gives you a look where they're playing that off coverage on Kyron Lacey a lot. And so you're just taking those 8 to 10 yard hitches like LSU kept doing on Saturday. And that kind of kept Garrett's, yardage down, moving the chains, and then giving Kaden Durham, those short touchdown at the very end of the game. And, I guess that drive was, they were running the football a ton on that drive. So maybe not the best example, but, still putting themselves in manageable third downs, letting them move the chains, and win that football game the way that they did. And that's a sign of growth. It's easy to look at the stat line and be like, oh, maybe did Garrett not play well or something? What's up with that? Not throwing a touchdown. It's like, no, the rest of the team is playing really well too now. And that's a great sign for where they're headed, because not everything falls on his shoulders and his arm and his ability to make plays. Now, he's probably going to need to do that a lot this weekend against Texas A&M. He's going to have to come up big in this game and be sharp. But, there is other elements of this team now that are starting to kind of catch up and turn and become potential strengths.
One thing from the injury list that jumped off, that's Trey Holly on that list, right? I mean, that's the running back, Trey Holly?
Yes, for the first time this season, Trey Holly is on LSU's availability report. I'm not sure what's up with that. Asked an LSU spokesman last night, is he on the team now or is it in some capacity? And he said no. But then asked why he availability report didn't give an answer, a clear answer to that. So not sure why Trey Holly is only just now showing up on that, but the word from LSU is that he is not back on the team.
Big story. We'll continue to watch it. If you want to keep up with the latest, Wilson Alexander is the guy at WHAlexander_ on social media to follow the latest. Speaking of running back, Kaden Durham is averaging nearly 7 yards a carry. He is not 100%. That is clear and evident after the South Alabama game. And to get the performance that he had last week, over 100, 3 touchdowns, a running game that needed to happen is now counting on a true freshman. What a story here going into this big matchup in Kyle Field of what Kaden Durham has meant to this offense.
Coming out of the locker room up in Arkansas, Kaden was wearing a boot, a foot, and it's like, oh no, what's going on there? But then we get to talk to Kaden Durham post-game and actually just ask him about it. He said it's just been a precautionary thing, kind of since the South Alabama game, when he, had that foot injury, that LSU's just kind of play it safe in some of those situations. And so, yeah, he's out there at 85%. Making cuts and exploding upfield like he did against Arkansas. It looked like, having that extra week to kind of continue to recover for that foot seemed to help him against Arkansas. Things were really muddy up front against Ole Miss anyway, but it just felt like he maybe had that little bit of against Arkansas, and goes for over 103 touchdowns. And he's just he's been playing so well because he's got great vision. He's kind of, he's low to the ground, like at 5'8", but he's also just sort of runs like low to the ground. It feels like in some ways, like it makes it just hard for defenders to kind of square him up. And so breaking tackles. I mean, 80 of his 101 yards came after contact against Arkansas, and that's kind of been have come after contact. According to Pro Football Focus, and he just keeps bouncing off of defenders, and you have to do that in this league. And also, run blocking certainly was better. Everything looked so much smoother in the run game for LSU against Arkansas, but Kaden Durham was making a lot of that happen still.
You mentioned the run game, and I saw your piece that you wrote yesterday with Garrett Nussmeier trying to get comfortable in the run game. Do you think, obviously there's been a lot made of him pulling it on a like a run pass option or a quarterback choice, and he obviously gives a thumbs up to Brian Kelly, who's been emphasizing the run game for Garrett Nussmeier. What did you take away from the conversations you had, whether it's he's not comfortable doing it, or is it something that they're wanting to protect him from actually running the football, but now that you're trying to get the running game going, it's something they're putting an emphasis on?
It's something that LSU's been trying to get him to feel comfortable doing and actually start to do. It's never, I don't think, been like necessarily a protecting him kind of thing. Like, they want him to try to run the football a little bit more in certain situations. Let's be clear. Like Brian Kelly said last week, they're not going to put in run quarterback packages for him, because he's not Jaden Daniels. But there are moments where he needs to be able to keep the football. And so, you saw that fist pump in the second half after he kept on his zone read and only picked up 5 yards. It wasn't the prettiest thing ever, but Garrett looked over the sideline and he said he pumped his fist and he was doing it right at Brian Kelly, because Brian Kelly is the one who will tell him when, right after he misses one of those reads, you got to pull the ball. And so they've been working with him on that. And it was interesting talking to Garrett himself about this on Tuesday, because he acknowledged it. He said, that's something I've been battling. But for so long, these are sort of paraphrasing Garrett's words here, he's been a quarterback who has only just had around his arm. He's never needed to really do this, but now he needs to have that little bit of element to his game. And so it's something he's been working on, trying to just realize, okay, make it instinctive. When do I just take off and go and not have to think about it? And, you kind of seen it in glimpses over the last 3 games, where he had that 5-yard scramble for a touchdown against South Alabama. He had that big first down pickup against Ole Miss, and with pulling the ball late in the game against Arkansas off a blitzer on his own on a read like that. He's like, okay, that was finally the first time that he had done that. And it's not going to be a regular thing. Garrett Nussmeier isn't going to be running the ball 10 times a game. But if there's 3 or maybe even 4 mixed in there, where they're able to take advantage of a defense that over pursues on a read, then maybe he can pick up positive yardage and help LSU keep the chains moving. And or Brian Kelly made the comparison to Joe Burrow on Sunday, or I guess it was Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago against the Giants, where everybody clears out and he goes for that 46-yard touchdown. Those sorts of things. If Garrett can start to do that, then it just adds another element to his game that defenses have to worry about.
What have you learned about Texas A&M in your preparation before Saturday night?
They're going to run the football. They average over 200 yards on the ground. Le'Veon Moss has been really good. Connor Wegman, it's interesting. It's what version of Connor Wegman are we going to see out there at quarterback? The one who threw for completed over 80% of his passes against Missouri, or the one who threw a bunch of balls that were nearly, I think he threw a couple of interceptions against Mississippi State, but then there was even more on top of that where it was kind of a dangerous throw. And so, it's an unclear kind of, he's been injured for a good chunk of the season, so it's kind of you don't know what you're necessarily going to get out of him. But LSU, Texas A&M's passing game hasn't necessarily been effective. It feels like if you stop the run on defense like you did against Arkansas last week, then LSU's going to be in a really good position to win this game. On the flip side, got to be able to try to establish the run against a Texas A&M defensive front that's pretty stingy. Nick Scorton and those guys are probably one of the better defensive fronts that LSU's played this year. But I think if you look at this matchup, LSU matches up pretty well, because we saw LSU go up against some really tough defensive fronts in South Carolina and Ole Miss. Those are just as good as what Texas A&M has out there. Those are all pretty, I would say probably top 5 defensive fronts in the SEC, maybe top 6. And it goes up there with Georgia and I guess maybe Texas. And LSU handled them pretty well. South Carolina had the 2 sacks in the first half, but then the offensive line settled in, didn't have any sacks. And I feel like that's a good sign for maybe what LSU push here against Texas A&M, especially if that run game has gotten going and is something that they can repeat after what they showed against Arkansas.
Wilson, enjoy Kyle Field on Saturday night. It should be a incredible atmosphere for college football with a ton on the line here in late October. For the latest of LSU football, make sure and follow our friend Wilson Alexander at WH Alexander _.